Forerunner justice, he growled low and deep. We will see what that means. The great ship descended slowly through a vivid blue sky. Swarms of sentinels rose to greet it, thin beams of energy tethering it to them so they could guide it safely to the dock. 2 massive angular arms rising from a pedestal on the desert sands. Reiser stood by Bornsteller's side, watching the proceedings from a platform high above the ground. He felt awkward in the presence of these forerunners, their bulky armor shaped for ceremony, but there were also a few other humans. As the ship approached, its drive pulsed deep notes that resonated within the Florian's chest. The dock arms reached up to meet it, locking onto the ship's broad hull and lowering it carefully into place. The ship touched down with a loud and final boom. Near the ship's bow, a 3-winged door retracted. Cold fog welled up inside, puffed out, then swirled away in the rising heat. A hard light ramp flickered into being. Through the last of the inner mist emerged a massive structure, an oblong of silver-gray metal, its surface inscribed with glowing blue lines that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. The oblong descended to float just above the ground, where a flock of sentinels received it and dragged it forward with lighter tethers. Reiser was reminded of pallbearers carrying a coffin. The sentinels guided the oblong across the dock and down to another unfinished structure, still being shaped as they watched. Constructor machines like spiders spun hardening cocoons of metal around slowly ascending frameworks. Then Reiser understood. From below the rock and sand, out of the ark's deepest foundation, a massive tomb was being prepared. A void had already been cleared to receive the coffin. Sentinels dragged it to the edge of the void, a strange grave in a place where there was no real dirt, no real planet, and latched it into the waiting frame. The oblong coffin's blue lines flowed outward, spreading into the confining struts. Reiser puffed out his cheeks and looked up at his tall companion. Bornsteller was observing the ceremony with a gray, grim face. Hard to read. All Forerunner fighters looked gray and grim to the Florian. When all was ready, Bornsteller raised his arms to address the tomb. Ancilla 05032 of the designation Mendicant Bias, you have colluded with the greatest enemy of the mantle. A deep voice issued from the coffin and was amplified across the platform, echoing from the ship, the dock, the tomb, even now being given its final touches. Those who pass judgment should first judge themselves. The voice now echoed off far bluffs and canyons. Judge themselves, judge themselves. A sin to fight a sin, said Bornsteller. A lesser evil to stop a greater one. That is the choice I was forced to make. You had no such excuse. You brought matters to this point. Why was I spared then? You are brought here to be sentenced. You have not been immediately destroyed because you may yet be needed. Your intimate knowledge of the flood makes you invaluable, should they return. But we can never trust you, never again allow you any latitude. You will be entombed here. Your process is locked, frozen into a single thought for all eternity. Absolution. Should you be needed, you may be reawakened. Should there be no need, you will be buried here until the end of living time. Then I will serve as a monument to your sins. That is what you wish for. Bornsteller shook his head. I wish only for the mantle to be upheld. I am penitent. I know that what I have done cannot be forgiven. I will accept my stasis with grace and await a time when I might redeem myself. Aye, so shall it be, said Bornsteller. He reached out to a pylon, spread his hand across the controls as they appeared, and closed his fist. The constructors finished their webs and sealed themselves into the tomb's fabric. Mendicant Bias's coffin was locked in place. The entire structure dropped slowly below the ground, into the void in the foundation metal, its blue lines pulsing more and more slowly. One thought for all eternity, said Mendicant Bias. His tone sounded almost wistful. Now the lights were fading, flickering, going dark. Atonement! The tomb turned black as night. The machine's final words spread across the false desert and echoed moments later from the false mountains. Bornsteller, Reiser, Trial, Chant, and all the rest watched silently as the last of Mendicant Bias, locked in eternal exile, was covered by sand.